You may not know the name Frances Haugen, but you should. You probably know her by her brave work as the Facebook whistleblower. Frances, thank you for coming to the South by Southwest studio. We appreciate it. And you're speaking tomorrow, 10 a.m. at the Convention Center.
Ballroom D.
Ballroom D. Everyone has to come and listen. I appreciate your work. Listen, you've been in just the frenzy of publicity the past few months. First question is, how are you holding up?
I'm doing pretty well. People often ask me, like, how has my life changed? And I feel really fortunate that it hasn't changed a ton on a day-to-day basis. My boyfriend and I mostly are kind of introverted. We cook a lot. But the thing where my life has really changed is that I can sleep at night. That a big part of why I came forward was I looked at what I saw as the most likely path if Facebook stayed on its current course. And that was that the lives of tens of millions of people are in danger over the next 20 years. And living with that secret was devastating. And since I've come out, like, unquestionably the best quality of life improvement is just that I'm at peace.
Which is if you can be at peace, especially during this time, that in itself is a gift. But you came to that point, it was a journey. And let's take the DeLorean back a little bit.
Sure.
You were excited to
Flap
join.
up the wings.
Yeah, you were excited to join Facebook. You joined their civic integrity team, right?
Yep.
And when you joined, what was your intention?
So I'm an algorithmic specialist. So I've worked on, but even before coming to Facebook, I'd already worked on 3 other social networks. And yes, there are other social networks.
There are, yes.
And I'd also worked on search quality at Google for a long time. And so I had experienced up close what it was like to lose someone that meant a lot to me. So I had an assistant that was like a little brother figure, right? So I met him through my own younger brother. He was instrumental in my recovery when I was relearning to walk. And I watched him really go into the deep end of misinformation over the course of 2016. And I remember how painful it was to feel that I couldn't pull him back to our shared reality, and that I never wanted anyone else to feel that loss that I felt as I went through that experience.
So, Frances, if I may, he then, it seemed like he got radicalized by misinformation on social media platforms. What was it specifically that he was taking in, the conspiracy theories that radicalized him?
So I do not know the like, I don't know, whatever the internet movement meme label was of 2016. But the moment at which that still like stands out in my memory of where I was like, I don't know how to bring him back, was we were earnestly arguing over, does George Soros run the world economy? Which, to anyone who is even a little familiar.
He does not. And it is an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that was the fringe, but now has become a mainstream talking about in America and Europe.
Yeah.
And one that is tied to the replacement theory, which is now mainstreamed in right-wing movements.
And it used to be a conspiracy theory, like no one...
On the fringe.
On the fringe,
right.
Yeah. And, we were exchanging 1,000-word emails back and forth, because like he's a smart, compassionate, college-educated, well-informed person, and yet because he had found himself in these echo chambers on 4chan, on 8chan back in the day, Reddit, we were having these intense, serious discussions. And I remember the moment where I knew there was nothing more I could do. He like said to me earnestly, do you even read your own citations? All of these are mainstream media. And it really demonstrated to me like what living in a post-truth world, like why it's so scary. Because how do we even get a chance to try to find truth if we don't agree on where to even start on that quest?
How does a democracy survive?
Exactly. How does democracy
survive? There's no basic facts, right?
Exactly.
Like the majority of Republicans believe in the big lie that Trump allegedly won the election. So you're at Facebook at this time.
Yep.
And now you're personally feeling this loss of a friend. And this is important.
So I was working at Pinterest. Yeah.
Okay, but a smart, sensitive, intelligent person.
College educated.
Who went down the rabbit hole.
Totally.
Now a lot of people don't go down the rabbit hole of 4chan, 8chan. They go to Facebook.
Yeah, exactly.
So now you're at Facebook. You're doing good work, civic integrity. What were the red flags at Facebook that, wait a second, I'm working for someone that is radicalizing individuals right now?
So I think the first kind of wave of realization that this was a way bigger problem than even I had thought. Like I had lived with the consequences of misinformation in the United States. I did not realize when I took the job that I was actually going to work on exclusively misinformation outside the United States. I was going to work on misinformation in places that didn't have third-party fact-checking, or were in times of crisis where the situation evolved faster than journalists could keep up with it. And that exposed me to the fact that, Facebook has gone all around the world and basically bought the right to be the internet. So
2 billion users and growing.
Yeah, that's crazy. I thought it was like on the order, I don't know the exact number of like what part is in that sphere, but Facebook went into these countries and said, if you want to use the open internet, you're gonna have to pay for it. But if you want to use our closed internet, Facebook, it'll be free for you. And as a result, for a majority of languages in the world today, 80 to 90% of all the content available on the internet is only available on Facebook.
Wow.
And so when we talk about what misinformation does in the United States or in Western Europe, we have choices. We can choose to get information from other sources. For, 1 billion, 2 billion people in the world, they don't get another choice. And when Facebook lets them down, and they are, because Facebook's current censorship strategy doesn't take into consideration that the world is linguistically diverse.
Right.
That the AIs must be rewritten over and over and over again.
For each population.
For each language.
Yeah.
Because it's not even each language, it's each dialect. Like Scottish English is not the same as Iowa English, like where I grew up.
Or even India.
Or even India. Yeah. India's crazy. There's 14 languages in India spoken by 10 million or more people. And guess how many of them don't have safety systems for Facebook?
13.
Most of those, yeah.
Yeah. And so what was the tipping point where you're there, you're young, you're exposed. Last time I checked, you're not uber powerful. You might be in many ways. And you're like, this is dangerous.
Yeah.
I'm complicit in this misinformation that is causing actual genocide around the world. Myanmar.
Yeah.
What's happening with hate crimes in India, Sri Lanka. It's being weaponized. I got to do something.
Yeah. So it's interesting. All these things are continuums, in terms of magic points, where it's like, the question of when I was like, I'm going to have to act, didn't really come until they dissolved civic integrity after the 2020 election.
After the 2020 election.
Yeah. We avoided blood on the streets of the United States, and so Facebook was like, not so bad. I guess we're done here.
Even though 5 died in the January 6th violent insurrection.
Well, that's the thing is the people who would have stepped in and said, oh, interesting, like there's another. So to give you an example, like people often say, like, what was the role of Facebook on January 6th?
Yeah.
Things like live video. Facebook has very, very little control over it because it spreads so fast. It's very high bandwidth. It's hard to process. Facebook chose to give live video an outsized presence on the platform because it boosted the scores by 800x. Right. So
What do you mean by the scores?
So when Facebook's trying to decide what should it show you, it has a huge library of stuff it could show you. Every day when you open the app, there's probably 10,000 pieces of content it could show you. It has to order that content to say, what's the first 100 things you should see? Because you probably aren't going to look at more than 100 or 200 things today. And so they go through and they compute the likelihood that you'll you'll actually interact with this. But in the case of live video, they want it to be successful. They want people to see it when it's live. And so they'll always bump it to the top of your feed.
So live video gets bumped to the top?
Yeah,
okay.
even though they know they've had a problem in the past with things like people live casting their own suicides or live casting attacking a school, right?
Pornography, obscenity, violence, you could go down the list.
All down the list.
But it's okay, because
live video is important.
And you get the views, you get the eyeballs.
Views, yeah.
All right.
So, so when we say what could Facebook have done? They saw that on January 6th, the live video was being used to actively coordinate the people at the Capitol.
That's right. And
so there's this question of, should live video, if you know you can't oversee in any way, what level should you amplify it, right? So after the election, they announced to us, we're going to dissolve the team. And at that moment, it made me realize that Facebook saw that having critical mass inside the company working for change might actually lead to change, right? You have to have critical mass to get change. And they dissolved us around the company. And they said the real reason they did that was our work was so important, they needed to integrate it into all the other teams.
Which I hate to laugh. That's just like the laugh of pain or pained resignation. So, we just saw that democracy was literally under assault. So what we're going to do after the January 6th violent insurrection, where Facebook, our platform, was used by the people who tried to overthrow the election, was dissolve civic integrity.
Yeah.
And so for you, was that this company's not serious?
Yeah, it was this question of, there's a saying, we never solve problems within the frame of reference that creates them. We have to move beyond that frame of reference and to get meaningful solutions. And I could see that if Facebook was dismantling its own attempts to change internally, the only way we would get meaningful change is if the public got involved.
So then the next step, what made you decide to step up and give these documents to the SEC?
So one of the things that I wasn't aware of until I started working with lawyers was that in the United States, public companies have a duty to tell the truth to the public. So
Who would have thought? Wild.
I know. I always like to joke, and the reason for that is really simple, right? It's that if people are going to put their retirement accounts into publicly traded stocks, they need to trust that they have accurate information. They're not having that, the rug pulled out from under them.
Yeah, you need to have trust in the institutions.
I like to joke, in the United States, there are many things that are wrong that are legal, but it is illegal to mess with capitalism.
Yeah, that's never. You will be punished.
Yeah, you'll be punished
Severely.
for that one. And so, Facebook had a very intentional strategy. They knew that we each individually only have a little tiny peephole into how Facebook works, which is our own individual experience of Facebook. We don't get to see a representative effect of what it is. We only kind of see what happens to us, maybe see what happens to our friends. And Facebook has taken advantage of the fact that we couldn't see the full picture, because it meant that they could frame what the solutions were. They could say, no, this is only about freedom of speech and censorship.
Which is what they say.
Which is what they say.
I mean, and go ahead. I was in order to, I hate being in a position to defend Facebook.
Yeah.
But Facebook says,
Yeah.
listen, it's a free, open platform.
Yeah.
And anyone has a right to say what they want. We're not
Totally.
conservative.
Yeah.
We're not liberal. We're not Democrats. We're not Republicans. We don't want to self-censor.
Yeah.
That's not our job. Your response to that?
So my entire talk tomorrow, so I'm very grateful for Southwest for giving me a platform to talk about this, is that when we over-rely on censorship, it causes all sorts of problems because it's not very effective. And for people in the most fragile places in the world, places like Africa, places like India, other places that are Myanmar, right?
Where there's a genocide.
Where there was a genocide. Often these places are radically more linguistically diverse, and they're full of languages that often have a limited number of speakers. And Facebook's current censorship strategy does not scale to a linguistically diverse world. But the problem is, and to come back to the SEC, Facebook lied about that. They said, we have these magic beans, our AIs will keep you safe.
Just trust us.
Just trust us. Let us run as hot as we want. Let's make everything hyper viral. Let us do it the way we want to do it, and we'll write you some AIs. The AIs will keep us safe. And that denied the public a number of choices, right? There are people who used the platform because they thought it was safe, because they thought it was good for their kids.
Because you want to share photos of your cat.
Yeah.
You want to find your friend from high school.
Totally. And they trusted when Facebook said, we're doing all these things. When in reality, they probably wouldn't have used it had they known the truth. The second issue is advertisers used it who wouldn't have advertised had they known how bad the product was. A number of advertisers stepped back after I came forward. And the last is a lot of investors would have said, this is too risky. And so all in, that I maintain that is a violation of the SEC regulations. That Facebook lied to the public and it had material impacts on
And it
people's
knew it was
retirement
lying.
accounts. And they knew it was a lie.
They knew, they have the data, they're surgical on their data, they know what trends.
Exactly.
They know who's using it, they know what content's spreading.
Yep.
And it was not a surprise to anyone, especially at Facebook, that, the January 6th violent insurrectionists were using our platform to try to overthrow our democracy.
Yes.
But then when you try to hold Facebook accountable, they say, whoa.
We're freedom of speech.
We're freedom of speech.
And do you know what's crazy? So instead of making the product safer, so that's things like saying, you should have to click on a link before you reshare it, something that Twitter does. Literally after Jan 6th, they started going in there and developing tools to facilitate the organic dissolution of groups.
Okay, can you?
Isn't that a scary phrase?
It's a very Silicon Valley-esque term that sounds benign, but is actually dangerous.
Sounds terrifying, yeah. It's like part of why I always am a little frustrated when people are like, Francis is a dark horse for censorship, is probably the second most important issue beyond those questions around ethnic violence that I raised earlier. The second most important reason I came forward was I worked on a task force that was looking at adversarial harmful movements. So these are things like QAnon.
Yeah.
And Facebook knew that about 1% of any movement is the glue that holds that movement together. And if you could just go in there and figure out who those people are and selectively silence them, the whole movement will fall apart. And the problem with that, in my mind, is if we don't know that they took that action, we can't object to it. And should Facebook have the right to choose what social movements can succeed or not succeed in a way that is impossible for us to police? Right?
Right. Who watches the Watchmen?
Who watches the Watchmen?
And I only have you for another minute. I could talk to you for another
Yeah.
30, but no, I really could. But 2 questions. Does Facebook have blood in its hands?
Facebook has known for a long time that choices it made to optimize for profit were hurting people. It was causing kids to directly harm themselves, that it was facilitating suicides, that it was flaming ethnic violence around the world. I would say yes, Facebook has blood on its hands.
And I have not asked a guest to do this, but with the final 20 seconds, if you could look at the camera and you could talk to Facebook right now, can you tell Facebook what they need to do right now to right the wrongs?
I always like to say, and I mean this very earnestly, I really believe that all people have the power to change, and that there's an opportunity for Facebook to be more successful in the long term if they are more transparent and honest with the public today. Right now, I totally get it. Facebook needs to optimize for profit because of things like fiduciary duty to shareholders. But by becoming more genuinely transparent, we start to make space. We start to have an incentive beyond just pure profit. You know, maybe Facebook is 1% less profitable, 2% less profitable. But if the product itself is safer, if we don't have to just censor the most viral, dangerous content, if the product is actually safer, people will enjoy using it, and they're going to enjoy using it for more years to come.
Frances Haugen, thank you so much for being a whistleblower. You're
Thank you so
speaking
much.
tomorrow at the Convention Center at 10 a.m.
10 a.m.
Everyone should come by and check it out.
Ballroom D.
Ballroom D, thank you. Ballroom D tomorrow, 10 a.m. at the Convention Center. Absolutely fascinating. Best of luck with everything. Don't forget, you can watch all of our studio interviews on the South by Southwest TV app, available on Apple TV, Roku, Android TV, and Amazon Fire. These interviews are also available on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/SXSW. And for a complete list of our interview schedule, check out sxsw.com/studio. I'm Majat Ali. Thanks for tuning in.